A small voice cuts through the noise of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, forever changing a billionaire's heart. The crystal chandeliers of Le Bernardin cast dancing shadows across Isabella Chen's flawless complexion as she methodically cut through her $100 Wagyu beef, each movement precise and calculated, like everything else in her perfectly orchestrated life. At 32, she commanded a technology empire worth $3 billion. Her sharp intellect and ruthless business acumen having built Chen Industries from a small startup into a global powerhouse that controlled artificial intelligence systems used by governments worldwide. Her Hermes bag, worth more than most people's annual salary, sat perfectly positioned beside her plate while she reviewed quarterly reports on her tablet between bites. The restaurant buzzed with the quiet conversations of New York's elite, politicians, celebrities, and fellow billionaires who moved through life with the unshakable confidence that comes from never having to worry about anything as mundane as money. Isabella had specifically chosen this corner table at Le Bernardin, not for its privacy, but for its strategic positioning. From here she could observe every entrance, every deal being discussed at neighboring tables, every potential opportunity or threat that might walk through those doors. In her world, information was currency, and she was the wealthiest collector of secrets in the room. Ms. Chen, her assistant's voice crackled through her nearly invisible earpiece. The sole acquisition is ready for your signature. The contracts arrived an hour ago. Postpone it, Isabella replied, without looking up from her financial projections. Their desperation will increase the discount by morning. This was how Isabella Chen operated, with surgical precision and emotional detachment that had earned her the nickname the Ice Queen in business magazines. She had learned early that sentiment was a liability in the corporate world, that empathy was a weakness that competitors would exploit without hesitation. Every decision was calculated for maximum profit, every relationship evaluated for its strategic value. The waiter appeared at her elbow with practiced discretion, refilling her glass of Domaine de la Romanée Conti that cost more per bottle than most families spent on groceries in a month. She barely acknowledged his presence, treating service staff with the same invisible indifference she showed to background music or office furniture. As she signed a document that would close 3 factories and eliminate 2,000 jobs across the Midwest, Isabella felt nothing beyond satisfaction at the improved profit margins. The human cost never entered her calculations. These were simply numbers on spreadsheets, variables to be optimized for shareholder value. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother in San Francisco, probably another invitation to some charity gala that Isabella would politely decline. Philanthropy was for people who needed tax write-offs or public relations improvements. Isabella preferred her wealth to work for her, generating more wealth, expanding her influence, securing her position at the apex of global power. The restaurant's ambiance was carefully curated perfection: soft jazz, muted conversations, the gentle clink of expensive silverware against imported china. Every detail reinforced the bubble of privilege that surrounded diners like Isabella, insulating them from the harsh realities that existed just beyond these walls. Outside, November rain pelted the windows of Manhattan's Upper East Side, but inside Le Bernardin, the weather was just another distant concern for people who traveled by private car and never walked more than a few steps between heated buildings. Isabella had not touched a subway door handle or waited for a bus in over 15 years. Her world was climate-controlled, sanitized, and perfectly predictable. She glanced at her Patek Philippe watch, a gift to herself after her company's stock had reached an all-time high the previous month. The evening was proceeding exactly as planned. A productive dinner meeting with herself, reviewing acquisition targets and profit forecasts while enjoying cuisine that most people could only dream of affording. This was success, Isabella told herself as she prepared to review another batch of termination notices that would increase quarterly earnings by 12%. This was what she had worked 18-hour days to achieve, what she had sacrificed relationships and personal happiness to obtain. The loneliness that sometimes crept into her penthouse apartment at night was simply the price of excellence, the cost of being exceptional in a world full of mediocrity. As Isabella raised her wine glass in a silent toast to her own achievements, she had no idea that her perfectly controlled world was about to be shattered by a small voice carrying more wisdom than all her Harvard Business School professors combined. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the city streets, where a different kind of life struggled to survive, invisible to the golden cage where Isabella Chen ruled her empire of ones and zeros, profit margins and quarterly projections. But sometimes, the real world has a way of breaking through even the most carefully constructed barriers. The first crack in Isabella's perfectly controlled evening came as a whisper so soft, she almost missed it entirely. She was absorbed in calculating the projected savings from automating another manufacturing division when a small voice drifted through the restaurant's carefully orchestrated atmosphere like smoke through silk curtains. "Excuse me, miss?" Isabella's eyes remained fixed on her tablet screen, assuming the voice was directed at someone else. Service staff knew better than to interrupt her during business hours, and no one else in this establishment would dare approach without a formal introduction through mutual connections. "Miss?" The pretty lady in white. This time, Isabella's fingers paused over her tablet. The voice was young, impossibly young to be in a restaurant where the children's menu started at $60. She glanced up with the practiced expression of irritation she reserved for interruptions, ready to dismiss whatever charity solicitor or confused tourist had somehow bypassed the restaurant's security. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Standing beside her table was a little girl who couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with tangled brown hair that looked like it hadn't seen a proper brush in weeks, and clothes that told a story Isabella had never bothered to read. The child wore a faded pink sweater with holes at the elbows, jeans that were too big and rolled up at the cuffs, and sneakers that had been white once but were now the color of city streets and broken dreams. But it was the girl's eyes that stopped Isabella cold. They were the darkest brown she had ever seen, old beyond their years, holding depths of experience that seemed impossible in someone so young. They weren't the eyes of a child who had been sheltered and protected. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much, understood too much, survived too much. "I'm sorry to bother you," the little girl continued, her voice carrying a politeness that seemed learned through necessity rather than privilege. "But I was wondering if you were going to finish all that food." Isabella's gaze dropped to her plate, where she had barely touched the Wagyu beef and truffle risotto that cost more than many people's daily wages. The portions at Le Bernardin were generous by fine dining standards, and Isabella rarely finished her meals, her appetite perpetually diminished by stress and stimulants. Isabella began, then stopped, completely at a loss for words. In 32 years of life and 15 years of high-stakes business negotiations, she had never been asked such a direct, innocent question. Her mind, trained to calculate advantages and identify threats, couldn't process the simple humanity of what she was hearing. The little girl seemed to sense Isabella's confusion and quickly added, "I don't mean to take your food if you're still eating. I can wait. I just thought maybe if you were done, instead of throwing it away." She trailed off, looking down at her worn sneakers. Isabella glanced around the restaurant, suddenly conscious of the other diners for the first time that evening. Had anyone else noticed this strange interaction? Were people staring? What was the protocol for handling homeless children in establishments like this? These weren't problems that appeared in her carefully curated world. "How did you get in here?" Isabella asked, though her voice came out softer than she intended. Le Bernardin had security, reservations months in advance, dress codes that were strictly enforced. A child in torn clothes shouldn't have been able to cross the threshold. "The back door was open," the girl replied simply. "They were bringing in boxes of food, and I thought maybe they wouldn't notice one small person. I wasn't trying to steal anything," she added quickly, anxiety creeping into her voice. "I just get really hungry sometimes, and the smells coming from here are so beautiful." Something twisted in Isabella's chest, an unfamiliar sensation that she couldn't immediately categorize or dismiss. The child spoke about hunger, with a matter-of-factness that suggested this wasn't a temporary inconvenience, but a constant companion. She talked about the restaurant's smells being beautiful, with the same reverence Isabella might reserve for a particularly profitable merger. "Where are your parents?" Isabella heard herself asking, though part of her business-trained mind was already calculating how to extract herself from this situation with minimal disruption to her evening. "I don't have any," the girl replied without self-pity, stating it as simply as she might mention the weather. "It's just me now, but I take care of myself pretty good. I know how to stay safe and find places to sleep when it's cold." The casual way the child discussed homelessness and survival hit Isabella like a physical blow. This wasn't theoretical poverty from news reports or charity advertisements. This was a real person, a child, standing 3 feet away and describing a life that existed in the shadows of Isabella's golden world. Isabella looked at her half-finished meal, food that would be scraped into garbage bins and forgotten, while this little girl went hungry on the streets outside. For the first time in years, she felt something that resembled shame, though she couldn't quite name it or understand why. "What's your name?" Isabella asked, surprising herself by caring about the answer. "Sophia," the girl replied, a small smile breaking across her face like sunrise after a long night. "What's yours?" The question was so innocent, so normal, that Isabella almost laughed. When was the last time someone had asked her name without already knowing exactly who she was, what she was worth, what she could do for them? "Isabella," she replied, and realized it was the first genuine introduction she had made in months. Sophia nodded solemnly, as if filing this information away carefully. "That's a pretty name. It sounds like music." Isabella found herself studying this strange child who saw beauty in names and restaurant aromas, while living a life that most adults couldn't survive. There was something about Sophia that didn't fit the narrative Isabella had constructed about homeless people. Something intelligent and articulate that challenged her assumptions about poverty and its causes. The restaurant continued its elegant symphony around them, but Isabella felt as if she and Sophia existed in a bubble, separate from all that luxury and pretense. The little girl waited patiently, not demanding or begging, simply hoping for kindness from a stranger who had more food than she could eat. Isabella realized she was at a crossroads, though she couldn't yet see all the paths branching out from this moment. She could call security, have Sophia removed, and return to her carefully controlled evening. She could offer money and dismiss the problem with her checkbook. Or she could do something else entirely, something that scared her precisely because she couldn't calculate its outcomes or control its consequences. "Sophia," Isabella said carefully, "would you like to sit down?" The words left Isabella's mouth before her rational mind could intervene, hanging in the air between them like a bridge she couldn't uncross. Sophia's eyes widened with surprise, as if kindness from strangers was so rare that even a simple invitation to sit felt miraculous. "Really?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You want me to sit with you?" Isabella found herself nodding, though every fiber of her business training screamed warnings about unpredictable variables and uncontrolled situations. She gestured to the empty chair across from her, watching as Sophia approached it with the careful movements of someone who had learned not to assume welcome anywhere. The child climbed onto the chair, her small frame nearly swallowed by the elegant upholstery designed for adults. Her feet dangled several inches from the floor, and she folded her hands in her lap with a formality that seemed both endearing and heartbreaking. Despite her obvious hunger and circumstances, Sophia sat with remarkable composure, as if she understood the gravity of being invited into a world where she clearly didn't belong. Isabella pushed her plate toward the center of the table, the expensive china making a soft scraping sound against the linen tablecloth. "Please," she said, surprised by the gentleness in her own voice. "I really wasn't going to finish it." Sophia stared at the food as if it were a work of art in a museum, beautiful to observe but forbidden to touch. The Wagyu beef had been prepared by one of the world's most celebrated chefs, garnished with microgreens that cost more per ounce than gold, accompanied by truffle risotto that represented hours of skilled preparation. "Are you sure?" Sophia asked, her politeness suggesting she had been raised with manners despite her current circumstances. "It looks too beautiful to eat." Isabella watched, fascinated despite herself, as Sophia picked up the heavy silver fork with both hands and took a small, careful bite. The child's eyes closed as she chewed, her expression one of pure reverence, as if she were trying to memorize every flavor, every texture, every sensation. "This is the most delicious thing I've ever tasted," Sophia said after swallowing, her voice filled with wonder. "It tastes like happiness." The simple poetry of the observation hit Isabella unexpectedly. When was the last time she had truly tasted her food, rather than simply consuming it while multitasking? When had she last experienced anything with the pure joy that Sophia brought to this simple meal? "Tell me about yourself, Sophia," Isabella said, settling back in her chair and giving the child her full attention for the first time. "How long have you been on your own?" Sophia took another careful bite before answering. clearly savoring each moment. About a year now. My grandmother was taking care of me after my parents died, but then she got sick too. When she went to heaven, the people from the government wanted to put me in a big house with lots of other kids. But it seemed scary there. The matter-of-fact way Sophia discussed such profound loss struck Isabella silent. This child spoke about death and abandonment with the same calm acceptance that Isabella used to discuss market fluctuations. "So, you've been living on the streets for a year?" Isabella asked, trying to keep judgment out of her voice. "Not on the streets exactly," Sophia corrected, continuing to eat with methodical appreciation. "I found places. There's an old church where Father Miguel lets me sleep sometimes when it's really cold. And there's a library where I can stay during the day. The librarians are nice to me as long as I'm quiet and don't bother anyone." "What do you do at the library?" Sophia's face brightened noticeably. "I read everything. Books about science and history and faraway places. I taught myself to read really good, and now I help some of the other people there who are learning English. Mrs. Rodriguez says I'm smart for my age." Isabella felt another unfamiliar twist in her chest. This child, living in circumstances that would break most adults, was spending her days reading and helping others learn. The contrast with Isabella's own privileged education and subsequent focus solely on personal enrichment was stark and uncomfortable. "What's your favorite subject?" Isabella found herself asking, genuinely curious about the answer. "Mathematics," Sophia replied without hesitation. "Numbers are honest. They don't lie or change their minds or go away when you need them. 2 plus 2 is always 4, no matter what happens in the world." The observation was so insightful that Isabella blinked in surprise. This 8-year-old had articulated something about the reliability of mathematics that most of Isabella's graduate school classmates had never grasped. "Do you know multiplication?" Isabella asked, her business mind automatically shifting into assessment mode. Sophia nodded enthusiastically. "Tables up to 12, and I know division and fractions too, and some geometry. The library has lots of math books, and I like solving the problems because they make sense." Isabella pulled out her phone and quickly opened the calculator app. "What's 347 times 23? Sophia's eyes focused on something invisible in the air above the table, her lips moving silently for perhaps 10 seconds. 7-981, she said confidently. Isabella stared at her phone screen displaying the same number. This homeless child had performed complex mental arithmetic faster than most people could input the numbers into a calculator. That's exactly right, Isabella said slowly. "How did you do that so quickly?" "I see the numbers in patterns," Sophia explained, taking another reverential bite of the truffle risotto. "Like 347 is 300 plus 40 plus 7, and 23 is 20 plus 3, so I can break it into pieces and add up all the parts. It's like a puzzle that always has a perfect answer." Isabella felt her worldview shifting in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. This child possessed intellectual gifts that were being completely wasted, talents that under different circumstances could revolutionize fields of study. Yet here Sophia sat in torn clothes, grateful for restaurant leftovers, her brilliant mind hidden from a world that had failed to protect or nurture her. "Sophia," Isabella said carefully, "have you ever thought about going to school?" The child's expression grew wistful. "I think about it all the time, but you need an address and a guardian and lots of papers to go to school. I tried once, but they said I couldn't stay without proper documentation. What would you want to study if you could go to school?" "Everything," Sophia replied immediately, her eyes lighting up with an intensity that reminded Isabella of her own younger self, back when learning had been about curiosity rather than competitive advantage. "Science and literature and history and languages. I want to understand how everything works and fits together." Isabella watched this remarkable child continue eating with careful gratitude, each bite treated as a gift rather than an entitlement. The contrast with her own relationship to food, and to life in general, was becoming impossible to ignore. "Sophia," Isabella said suddenly, "what do you think success means?" The question seemed to catch Sophia off guard, and she paused with the fork halfway to her mouth. After a moment of serious consideration, she replied, "I think success is when you can help other people be happy and safe. Like Mrs. Rodriguez at the library, she's successful because she helps people learn to read, and that makes their lives better." The simplicity and wisdom of the answer hit Isabella like a physical blow. Success as service to others, rather than domination over them. Success measured by contribution rather than accumulation. It was a definition that made Isabella's $3 billion empire seem suddenly hollow and meaningless. As Sophia continued eating, occasionally sharing small observations about the food or asking polite questions about the restaurant, Isabella found herself studying this extraordinary child with growing amazement. Here was intelligence without arrogance, poverty without bitterness, loss without cynicism. Sophia had experienced more hardship in 8 years than Isabella had in 32, yet the child's spirit remained unbroken, her capacity for wonder intact, her instinct for kindness undamaged. The longer they sat together, the more Isabella realized she was in the presence of something rare and precious, a person whose character had been refined by suffering rather than corrupted by it, whose values remained pure despite a world that had given her every reason to become hard and selfish. And for the first time in years, Isabella found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about success, happiness, and what it meant to live a meaningful life. As Sophia savored the last bite of truffle risotto with the reverence of someone receiving communion, Isabella found herself doing something she hadn't done in 15 years. She canceled her evening meetings. With swift efficiency, she sent messages postponing 3 conference calls with Asian markets and rescheduling a merger discussion that had taken months to arrange. "Sophia," Isabella said, closing her tablet completely for the first time during a meal in recent memory, "I want to hear more about your life. How do you survive day to day?" The child carefully placed the silver fork on the plate with the same precision Isabella might use when signing a billion-dollar contract. "I have a system," Sophia explained matter-of-factly. "I wake up early and go to the library when it opens. I read and study until they close, then I find somewhere safe to sleep. On weekends, I help at Father Miguel's soup kitchen, and he lets me take some food home. What about clothes, medical care, basic necessities? There's a donation center where people bring clothes sometimes, and the clinic on 5th Street sees people for free on Thursdays if you wait in line early enough." Sophia spoke about navigating social services and charity organizations with the expertise of a seasoned social worker, despite being 8 years old. Isabella felt another uncomfortable shift in her perspective. While she complained about traffic delays in her private car, this child was mastering urban survival skills that most adults never learned. While Isabella's biggest concern was choosing between multiple luxury options, Sophia was solving complex logistical problems of basic survival with intelligence and resourcefulness that impressed even someone with Isabella's analytical mind. "You mentioned helping people learn English at the library," Isabella said. "Tell me about that." Sophia's face brightened with genuine joy. "There's this man, Mr. Petrov, who came from Russia with his family. He's really smart, but English is hard for him. So I sit with him during story time and help him practice reading the children's books out loud. And there's Mrs. Carmen from Guatemala who wants to help her daughter with homework, so I teach her mathematics." The image of this homeless child tutoring adults struck Isabella as both inspiring and tragic. Sophia was giving freely of her intellectual gifts to help others, expecting nothing in return beyond the satisfaction of service. It was the kind of pure altruism that Isabella had learned to dismiss as naive or inefficient in her business philosophy. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Isabella asked, though the question felt almost cruel given Sophia's circumstances. "A teacher," Sophia replied without hesitation. "But not just any teacher. I want to create a school where kids like me can learn even if they don't have regular homes or families. A place where being smart matters more than having money, where everyone gets to discover what they're good at." The vision Sophia described with such clarity and passion made Isabella's throat tighten unexpectedly. This child had experienced systemic abandonment by every institution designed to protect her, yet her response was to dream of building better institutions for others facing similar challenges. "That's a beautiful dream," Isabella said, meaning it more than any compliment she had given in years. "Dreams are important," Sophia replied seriously. "They're like mathematical equations. They only work if you're willing to do all the steps to solve them. I'm still figuring out what steps I need to take, but I know the answer is possible." Isabella stared at this extraordinary child, who spoke about achieving impossible dreams with the same logical confidence she brought to mental arithmetic. Sophia's optimism wasn't naive ignorance. It was informed hope based on rigorous analysis of possibilities and constraints. "Sophia," Isabella said carefully, "what if someone wanted to help you take those steps? What would that look like?" The child considered the question with the same serious attention she had given the mathematics problem earlier. "I think the biggest step would be getting back into school officially. Everything else, college, becoming a teacher, building my own school, that all starts with having a real education foundation. And what would it take to get you enrolled in school? A permanent address, a legal guardian, immunization records, birth certificates." Sophia rattled off the requirements as if she had researched them extensively. "I have some of the papers from when I lived with my grandmother, but not all of them. And nobody wants to be responsible for a kid they don't know." The bureaucratic barriers Sophia described with such clinical understanding represented solvable problems to someone with Isabella's resources and connections. For the first time in years, Isabella found herself mentally calculating not profit margins or competitive advantages, but the practical steps required to change a child's life trajectory. "What if those problems could be solved?" Isabella asked quietly. Sophia looked at her with those impossibly wise eyes, and for a moment, Isabella felt as if the child could see directly into her soul. "Why would you want to help me? You don't even know me." The question was fair and deserved an honest answer. Isabella examined her own motivations, surprised to discover that her usual frameworks for relationship analysis didn't apply here. There was no strategic advantage to helping Sophia, no networking benefit, no positive publicity opportunity that would justify the investment. "I think," Isabella said slowly, working through thoughts she had never articulated before, "I've spent so many years focused on accumulating things that I forgot about creating things. You want to build something beautiful, a school that helps children like yourself. That's more meaningful than anything I've accomplished with all my money and power." "Money and power aren't bad things," Sophia said, with the diplomatic wisdom of someone who had learned to navigate adult emotions carefully. "They're tools. The question is what you build with them." The observation was so profound that Isabella felt her entire worldview shift another degree. This homeless child understood something about wealth and influence that Isabella had missed, despite decades of elite education and business experience. "You're right," Isabella admitted. "I've been using my tools to build walls instead of bridges, to create distance instead of connection." "It's not too late to build different things," Sophia said gently. "My grandmother used to say that every sunrise is a new chance to choose who you want to be." Isabella felt tears forming in her eyes for the first time in years. When had she last cried about anything other than frustration or anger? When had she last felt the kind of pure emotion that Sophia's simple wisdom evoked? "Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman," Isabella said. "She was everything good in the world," Sophia replied, her voice carrying love and loss in equal measure. "She taught me that being poor in money doesn't mean being poor in spirit, and that the richest people are those who give the most love." The contrast between Sophia's grandmother's teachings and Isabella's own upbringing struck her forcefully. Where Isabella had been taught to compete, accumulate, and dominate, Sophia had been raised with values of service, compassion, and generosity. As the evening progressed and other diners gradually left the restaurant, Isabella found herself reluctant to end this conversation that was challenging everything she thought she knew about success, happiness, and purpose. Sophia had become not just an interesting dinner companion, but a mirror reflecting back the emptiness of Isabella's carefully constructed life. "Sophia," Isabella said finally, "I want to ask you something important. Would you let me help you get back into school?" The child's eyes widened with surprise and something that might have been hope. "Really? You would do that?" "I would consider it an honor," Isabella replied, and realized she meant it completely. "But I need you to understand that I'm not just offering charity. I'm asking for the chance to learn from you, to understand what it means to live with purpose and meaning." Sophia studied Isabella's face with the intensity of someone who had learned to read adult intentions for survival. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she smiled, the first completely unguarded expression Isabella had witnessed from her. "I would like that very much," Sophia said. "But I have one condition." "What's that?" "When I become a teacher and build my school, you have to help me make sure it's the kind of place where every child feels valuable, no matter where they come from. Isabella reached across the table and took Sophia's small hand in hers, feeling the calluses from months of survival mixed with the soft vulnerability of childhood. "It's a deal," Isabella said, and knew that her life had just changed forever. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Isabella found herself doing something that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. She was personally driving through Queens at 7 in the morning, bringing Sophia to her first day at Riverside Preparatory Academy, one of Manhattan's most prestigious private schools. The enrollment process had required every resource at Isabella's disposal: legal teams to expedite documentation, medical professionals to provide immediate health certifications, and significant financial contributions to ensure Sophia's immediate acceptance. But watching the child's face light up as they approached the school's elegant brick buildings made every obstacle worth navigating. "It's beautiful," Sophia breathed, pressing her face to the car window. She wore a crisp, new uniform that Isabella had personally selected, her hair neatly braided, her backpack filled with supplies that most students took for granted. "Are you nervous?" Isabella asked, though she was surprised to realize she was the one feeling anxious. Over the past 3 weeks, she had become deeply invested in Sophia's success in ways that defied her usual emotional detachment. "A little," Sophia admitted, "but also excited. Do you know they have a library with over 10,000 books? And science laboratories with real microscopes? And computers for every student?" Isabella smiled at Sophia's enthusiasm, remembering when her own excitement about education had been about learning rather than competing. Through Sophia's eyes, she was rediscovering the pure joy of intellectual curiosity. The transformation in Isabella's own life over these 3 weeks had been equally dramatic. She had moved Sophia into the guest room of her penthouse apartment, officially becoming her legal guardian through an expedited process that money and influence had made possible. More importantly, she had begun reorganizing her entire schedule around Sophia's needs and interests. Ms. Chen, the school's headmaster, Dr. Margaret Thornfield, greeted them personally at the entrance. "And this must be Sophia. We're so excited to have you join our community." Isabella watched with pride as Sophia shook hands with Dr. Thornfield with perfect poise, her natural intelligence and courtesy immediately evident. The headmaster had been skeptical when Isabella first called about emergency enrollment for a homeless child, but Sophia's placement tests had eliminated all doubts about her academic capabilities. Sophia tested at a 9th grade level in mathematics and an 11th grade level in reading comprehension, Dr. Thornfield had told Isabella after the assessment. "In my 30 years in education, I've rarely seen such natural intellectual gifts. She's truly extraordinary." As they toured the school facilities, Isabella found herself seeing everything through Sophia's perspective. The well-equipped classrooms that Isabella had taken for granted during her own privileged education became marvels of opportunity and possibility when viewed through the eyes of someone who had been denied access to basic educational resources. "The library is where I'll spend most of my free time," Sophia announced with certainty as they explored the impressive collection. "And I want to join the mathematics club and the debate team and the science fair committee. Those are ambitious goals," Dr. Thornfield said with approval. "I think you'll find our students are excited to meet someone with your passion for learning." When it came time for Isabella to leave Sophia for her first day of classes, both of them felt the emotional weight of the moment. Over 3 weeks, they had become not just guardian and ward, but genuine friends who had learned from each other in ways neither had expected. "I'll pick you up at 3:30, Isabella promised, hugging Sophia goodbye. "I want to hear about everything you learned." "Thank you," Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just for the school, but for believing in me." As Isabella drove back to her office, she reflected on how dramatically her priorities had shifted. The merger discussions and profit projections that had once consumed her attention now seemed trivial compared to Sophia's educational progress and personal development. Her assistant, Marcus, noticed the change immediately when Isabella arrived at Chen Industries headquarters. "You seem different," he observed as they rode the elevator to the executive floor. "More present, somehow." Isabella considered the observation. "I think I'm remembering what it feels like to care about something beyond quarterly earnings," she replied. "It's been a long time since I had that experience." The morning passed quickly as Isabella handled essential business, while eagerly anticipating Sophia's first-day report. She found herself checking her phone repeatedly, hoping for updates from the school, worrying about Sophia's social integration with children from vastly different backgrounds. At noon, her phone finally rang with a call from Dr. Thornfield. "Ms. Chen, I wanted to update you on Sophia's morning," the headmaster said, her tone carefully neutral in a way that made Isabella's stomach clench with anxiety. "Is everything all right? Is she having trouble adjusting?" "Quite the opposite," Dr. Thornfield replied, and Isabella could hear amazement in her voice. "Ms. Chen, I need to ask you something confidential about Sophia's background." "Of course. What do you need to know?" "You mentioned that Sophia had been living on the streets for approximately a year before you met her, but her knowledge base and academic sophistication suggest a much more extensive educational foundation than would be possible from library self-study alone." Isabella felt a flutter of unease. "What exactly are you saying?" "This morning, Sophia was placed in our advanced mathematics course as a trial run. She not only kept pace with students 2 years older, but she solved several problems using techniques that aren't typically taught until college-level calculus. When I asked her about it, she said she figured them out from reading university textbooks." The information sent a chill through Isabella. She had been impressed by Sophia's intelligence from their first meeting, but this suggested capabilities that went far beyond what she had understood. "Furthermore," Dr. Thornfield continued, "during lunch, Sophia was observed having a detailed conversation in fluent Mandarin with our exchange student from Beijing. When questioned, she claimed to have learned it from books and online videos during her time at the library." Isabella's mind raced through the implications. "Dr. Thornfield, are you suggesting that Sophia isn't who she claims to be?" "I'm suggesting that Sophia may have a background that she hasn't fully disclosed, either to protect herself or because she doesn't understand its significance. Children sometimes hide their past when they've experienced trauma or instability. The possibility that Sophia had been concealing important information about her history was both concerning and understandable." Isabella realized that despite 3 weeks of close contact, she might know less about Sophia's true story than she had assumed. "What do you recommend?" Isabella asked. "I think Sophia needs to be evaluated by our school psychologist, not because she's problematic, but because understanding her complete background will help us provide the best possible educational support. Genius-level children often have complex needs that require specialized attention." Isabella agreed to the evaluation, but spent the rest of the day wrestling with questions about Sophia's mysterious past. Who was this child, really? What experiences had shaped her extraordinary capabilities? And why did Isabella feel both protective and slightly apprehensive about discovering the complete truth? When she picked Sophia up from school that afternoon, Isabella studied the child's face carefully for any signs of distress or deception. Sophia appeared radiantly happy, chattering excitedly about her classes, her new teachers, and the friends she had already begun making. "Isabella, it was the most wonderful day of my life," Sophia said, as they drove home through Manhattan traffic. "I learned about molecular biology and ancient Roman history and quadratic equations. And at lunch, I met Jenny from China, and we talked about her home in Shanghai." "Sophia," Isabella said carefully, "Dr. Thornfield mentioned that you spoke with Jenny in Mandarin. When did you learn Chinese?" Sophia's expression became slightly guarded, the same careful look Isabella had learned to recognize when the child was protecting herself emotionally. "I pick up languages easily from listening and reading. Is that a problem?" "It's not a problem at all. I'm just curious about your educational background before you came to live with me. You have knowledge and skills that are quite advanced for someone your age." Sophia was quiet for several blocks, staring out the window at the city passing by. Finally, she spoke in a voice that was smaller and more vulnerable than Isabella had heard before. "My grandmother wasn't just any grandmother," Sophia said quietly. "She was Dr. Elena Martinez, and she used to be a professor at Columbia University before she retired. She taught me things that most kids don't learn until they're much older, because she said I had an exceptional mind that needed exceptional nurturing." The revelation hit Isabella like a physical blow. Dr. Elena Martinez had been a legendary figure in academic circles, a physicist whose research had contributed to multiple breakthrough technologies that Isabella's own company now utilized. "Sophia," Isabella said softly, Dr. Martinez was one of the most brilliant minds of her generation. Her work in quantum computing helped build the foundation for technologies that power half the modern world. She was the smartest person I ever knew, Sophia replied, tears beginning to form in her eyes. She taught me that intelligence is a gift that should be shared, not hoarded. She said that knowledge without compassion is just sophisticated ignorance. Isabella pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face Sophia completely. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because people treat you differently when they know your grandmother was famous, Sophia said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. They expect you to be special, or they think you're lying, or they want to use you for something. I learned it was easier to just be a regular homeless kid than to be the granddaughter of someone important who couldn't take care of me anymore. The pain in Sophia's voice made Isabella's heart ache. This brilliant child had been hiding not just her exceptional capabilities, but her connection to academic royalty, because she had learned that her grandmother's legacy made her survival more complicated rather than easier. Sophia, Isabella said gently, you don't have to hide who you are anymore. Not from me, not from anyone. Being Dr. Martinez's granddaughter doesn't make you more or less valuable as a person, but understanding your background helps me understand how to support you better. You're not angry that I didn't tell you everything? I'm not angry at all. I understand why you needed to protect yourself. But now that we're family, we can face everything together, including your past and your future. And as they sat in the car together, Isabella realized that Sophia's revelation changed nothing about her affection for the child, but everything about her understanding of the responsibility she had undertaken. She wasn't just raising a brilliant homeless girl. She was nurturing the intellectual heir to one of the greatest scientific minds of the modern era. The weight of that realization was both humbling and inspiring, marking another step in Isabella's transformation from a person who accumulated wealth to someone who cultivated wisdom. 6 months after Sophia's enrollment at Riverside Preparatory Academy, Isabella stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corporate boardroom. But instead of reviewing profit projections, she was reading Sophia's first semester report card, with tears of pride streaming down her face. Straight A's in all advanced courses, exceptional leadership in peer tutoring programs, and unanimous teacher recommendations for acceleration to high school mathematics, Isabella read aloud to her assistant Marcus, who had become deeply invested in Sophia's progress. Her science teacher says she's already demonstrating research capabilities at an undergraduate level. The transformation in both their lives had been extraordinary. Sophia was thriving academically and socially, her natural leadership abilities emerging as she organized study groups for struggling classmates and volunteered to tutor younger students. But perhaps more remarkably, Isabella's own metamorphosis had accelerated beyond anything she could have imagined. Ms. Chen, Marcus said carefully, the Beijing partners are still waiting for your response to their acquisition proposal. They've extended the deadline twice now. Isabella set down Sophia's report card and looked at the contract that would have consumed her attention for weeks, just months earlier. The deal would add $2 billion to her net worth and eliminate 3,000 jobs across manufacturing plants in developing countries. Decline it, Isabella said without hesitation. And Marcus, I want you to draft a counter-proposal. Instead of acquiring their factories, I want to partner with them to improve working conditions and wages for their employees. We'll sacrifice some profit margin to create something sustainable and ethical. Marcus's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he had learned not to question Isabella's recent business philosophy shifts. Over the past months, she had systematically restructured Chen Industries to prioritize social responsibility alongside financial returns, often to the bewilderment of her board of directors and the admiration of her employees. Also, Isabella continued, I want to establish the Elena Martinez Foundation for Educational Excellence. Allocate $50 million initially to provide full scholarships for academically gifted children from underserved communities. Sophia will help design the selection criteria. The foundation had been Sophia's idea, proposed during one of their nightly conversations about how to honor her grandmother's legacy. Isabella had been amazed by the sophistication of Sophia's vision for identifying and nurturing exceptional young minds, regardless of their economic circumstances. Speaking of Sophia, Marcus said with a smile, she called to remind you about her presentation to the school board tonight. She wanted to make sure you hadn't forgotten. Isabella checked her watch and felt the familiar flutter of pride mixed with nervousness that had become her constant companion when Sophia took on new challenges. Tonight, Sophia would present her proposal for a peer mentoring program to Riverside's Board of Trustees, the youngest student in school history to address the governing body. "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Isabella said, gathering her things. "Cancel everything else today. Sophia's presentation is the only meeting that matters." As Isabella drove through Manhattan toward Riverside Academy, she reflected on how completely her definition of success had evolved. 6 months ago, missing a board meeting would have triggered anxiety attacks. Now, she couldn't imagine prioritizing business obligations over Sophia's achievements and growth. The relationship had changed both of them profoundly. Sophia had found stability, educational opportunities, and the emotional security of unconditional love. Isabella had discovered purpose beyond profit, fulfillment beyond financial accumulation, and the deep satisfaction that came from nurturing another person's potential. But perhaps most importantly, Sophia had taught Isabella that true wealth wasn't measured in assets controlled, but in lives positively influenced. The school's auditorium was packed with parents, teachers, and board members when Isabella arrived. She found a seat in the front row, her heart swelling with pride, as Sophia took the stage with the poise of someone far beyond her 8 years. "Distinguished members of the board, teachers, and families," Sophia began, her clear voice carrying easily through the auditorium. "I want to talk to you tonight about the responsibility that comes with privilege." Isabella felt a chill of recognition. This was the same theme that Sophia had challenged her with during their first dinner together, now articulated with 6 months of additional growth and confidence. "When I was living on the streets," Sophia continued, "I learned that intelligence without opportunity is like having a key without knowing what door it opens. Many of the children I met during that time were brilliant, creative, and curious, but they never got the chance to discover their potential because they didn't have access to educational resources." The auditorium was completely silent, hanging on every word from this remarkable child who spoke about homelessness and educational inequality with the authority of lived experience. "Now that I have been given extraordinary opportunities here at Riverside Academy, I believe it's my responsibility to create bridges for other children to cross the same gap I was helped across. That's why I'm proposing the implementation of a comprehensive peer mentoring program." Sophia clicked to her first PowerPoint slide, displaying statistics about educational achievement gaps that she had researched with the thoroughness of a graduate student. According to current data, children from low-income families are 40% less likely to graduate from high school and 60% less likely to attend college, not because they lack ability, but because they lack access to support systems and mentorship opportunities. Isabella watched with amazement as Sophia presented her research findings, complete with data analysis, cost-benefit projections, and implementation timelines. The child had developed a sophisticated understanding of educational policy that rivaled professional consultants Isabella had hired for corporate projects. "My proposal is to establish partnerships between Riverside Academy students and children at 3 public elementary schools in underserved neighborhoods," Sophia explained. "Each Riverside student would commit to mentoring 2 younger children, providing tutoring, college preparation guidance, and most importantly, proof that educational advancement is possible regardless of background." The presentation continued for 20 minutes, with Sophia fielding questions from board members with confidence and expertise that left the adults visibly impressed. She had anticipated every concern, prepared detailed responses to potential objections, and demonstrated a mastery of educational theory that belied her age. The program would cost approximately $200,000 annually to implement, Sophia concluded, but the potential return on investment is immeasurable. We would be creating pathways for dozens of children to achieve educational success they might never have access to otherwise. When Sophia finished her presentation, the auditorium erupted in sustained applause. Board members stood, teachers wiped away tears, and parents looked at their own children with new appreciation for the educational opportunities they had taken for granted. Isabella rushed to the stage as soon as Sophia stepped down, embracing the child who had become not just her ward, but her greatest teacher and inspiration. "You were magnificent," Isabella whispered, holding Sophia tightly. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you. I hope so, Sophia replied, her voice thick with emotion. But I also hope she would be proud that I'm using everything she taught me to help other kids have the chances she gave me. Dr. Thornfield approached them with tears in her eyes. Sophia, I've been in education for 30 years, and I have never heard a more compelling or well-researched presentation from someone your age. The board voted unanimously to approve your program. The celebration that followed felt like a victory for everything Isabella had learned about purpose and meaning over the past months. Sophia's success wasn't just personal achievement. It was proof that exceptional potential existed everywhere, waiting for the right opportunities and support to flourish. Later that evening, as they sat together in Isabella's penthouse apartment reviewing the night's success, Sophia asked a question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. Isabella, do you ever regret changing your life so much? Do you miss being focused just on business and making money? Isabella considered the question seriously, looking around at the apartment that had been transformed from a sterile showcase of wealth into a warm home filled with Sophia's books, art projects, and the evidence of a life being lived rather than simply accumulated. Sophia, Isabella said finally, before I met you, I thought I was successful because I had built a $3 billion company. Now I understand that I was just successful at making money. Real success is what we've built together. A relationship based on love, learning, and service to others. So you don't regret it? I regret that it took me 32 years to understand what you knew instinctively at 8 years old. I regret all the time I wasted accumulating things instead of building relationships. But I don't regret a single moment since we've been together. Sophia curled up against Isabella on the couch, both of them reviewing the presentation materials and planning the implementation of the mentoring program that would soon change dozens of young lives. Can I tell you a secret? Sophia said quietly. Always. When I first asked you for your leftovers that night, I wasn't just hungry for food. I was hungry for connection, for someone to see me as a real person instead of just a problem to be avoided. You didn't just feed me dinner. You fed my hope that the world contained people who cared about others. Isabella felt tears welling up again, struck by the realization that their first meeting had been as transformative for Sophia as it had been for her. You saved my life too, Isabella replied. You showed me what it meant to live with purpose, to use whatever gifts I have in service of something bigger than myself. As they sat together planning Sophia's mentoring program and discussing the foundation they would build together, Isabella knew that her transformation was complete, but their work together was just beginning. They had found in each other not just family, but partners in the mission of creating a more just and compassionate world, one child, one opportunity, one act of love at a time. 2 years after a small voice had asked for leftovers in an expensive restaurant, Isabella Chen stood at the podium of the United Nations Children's Fund headquarters in New York. But she was not the same woman who had once measured success only in financial terms. Beside her, 10-year-old Sophia Martinez Chen radiated confidence as they prepared to address delegates from 53 countries about their revolutionary educational initiative. The Elena Martinez Foundation for Educational Excellence had grown beyond their wildest expectations, providing full scholarships to over 2,000 gifted children from underserved communities across 6 countries. But more than the numbers, it was the individual stories of transformation that filled Isabella's heart with a purpose she had never imagined possible. Distinguished delegates, Isabella began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned that true power comes from service rather than domination. 2 years ago, I believed that success was measured by how much wealth one could accumulate. Today, I stand before you as someone who has learned that real success is measured by how much potential one can help others realize. The audience of international education ministers, child welfare advocates, and humanitarian leaders listened with rapt attention as Isabella shared the story of her transformation, sparked by an encounter with an extraordinary child who had challenged everything she thought she knew about intelligence, worth, and purpose. The child who changed my life is here with me today, Isabella continued, not as a beneficiary of charity, but as my partner in building educational bridges for children around the world. Sophia Martinez Chen has taught me that genius is not rare. Opportunity is rare. Our foundation exists to change that reality. Sophia stepped to the microphone with the poise that had become her trademark, addressing world leaders with the same natural confidence she had shown since their first meeting. Thank you, Isabella, and thank you to all the delegates who have supported our international mentoring program, Sophia began. I want to share with you what I've learned about the relationship between education and hope. Isabella watched with infinite pride as Sophia presented their latest findings. Graduation rates among Foundation scholarship recipients exceeded 98%, with 87% pursuing higher education and 73% returning to serve their communities as teachers, doctors, and community leaders. But statistics only tell part of the story, Sophia continued. The real measure of our success is in letters like this one, from Maya in Mumbai, who wrote to tell us that becoming the first person in her family to attend university has inspired her 3 younger siblings to believe that education is possible for them too. Sophia read excerpts from dozens of similar letters, from students in rural Colombia who were now studying engineering, from children in inner-city Detroit who had discovered passions for art and literature, from refugee children who had found stability and hope through educational opportunities they never thought possible. Each of these students represents not just an individual success, but a ripple effect that will touch their families, their communities, and future generations, Sophia explained. This is how we change the world. One educated child at a time, one expanded possibility at a time, one act of faith in human potential at a time. The presentation concluded with an announcement that made headlines around the world: the establishment of the Global Education Equity Initiative, funded with $5 billion from Isabella's personal fortune and supported by partnerships with educational institutions on every continent. After the formal presentation, delegates approached Isabella and Sophia with questions, congratulations, and requests for partnerships in their home countries. But what moved Isabella most were the quiet conversations with people who shared their own stories of overcoming educational barriers and their commitment to ensuring the next generation would face fewer obstacles. Ms. Chen approached Dr. Amara Okafor, Nigeria's Minister of Education. What you and Sophia have accomplished gives me hope that we can solve the global education crisis. But I'm curious, what do you think your grandmother would say about what you've built together? Sophia's eyes brightened at the question. I think she would say that we're proving her favorite theory, that knowledge multiplies when it's shared, and that the best way to honor what we've been given is to give it away. Later that evening, Isabella and Sophia walked together through Central Park, reflecting on the day's presentations and the commitments they had made to expand their work internationally. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet as they discussed implementation strategies for new programs in Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. Isabella, Sophia said thoughtfully, do you remember what you asked me that first night? About what I thought success meant? I remember. You said success was helping other people be happy and safe. I still believe that. But I've learned something additional from watching you change over these 2 years. What's that? I've learned that sometimes the people who look like they have everything are actually the ones who need the most help finding their purpose. You had all the money and power anyone could want, but you weren't truly successful until you found a way to use those gifts in service of something bigger than yourself. Isabella stopped walking and looked at this remarkable child who continued to astound her with insights that rivaled the wisdom of philosophers and theologians she had studied. You're saying that I needed rescuing as much as you did? I think we rescued each other, Sophia replied with the gentle wisdom that had become her signature. I gave you a reason to use your wealth for good, and you gave me the stability and resources to develop my gifts. Neither of us could have become who we are now without the other. As they continued their walk, Isabella reflected on the profound truth of Sophia's observation. Their relationship had never been simply charitable rescue or grateful dependency. It had been a mutual transformation based on love, respect, and shared commitment to making the world more just and compassionate. What do you want to do next? Isabella asked, knowing that Sophia's visions often became their next revolutionary projects. I want to create teacher training programs in every country where we provide scholarships, Sophia replied immediately. Because exceptional students need exceptional teachers, and many communities lack educators who understand how to nurture advanced potential. Isabella smiled, recognizing the pattern that had characterized their partnership from the beginning. Sophia would identify a systemic problem with the clarity of a researcher and the compassion of someone who had lived through similar challenges. Isabella would provide the resources and connections necessary to transform Sophia's vision into reality. Together, they would build solutions that addressed not just immediate needs, but underlying structural inequities. "That's a brilliant idea," Isabella said. "But it will require partnerships with universities, government agencies, and teacher preparation programs around the world." "So we'll build those partnerships," Sophia replied with the matter-of-fact confidence that had impressed educators and world leaders alike. "Difficult doesn't mean impossible. It just means we need to be creative and persistent." When they returned to their apartment that evening, Isabella found a message waiting from the Nobel Committee, informing her that she and Sophia had been nominated for the Peace Prize in recognition of their contributions to global educational equity and child welfare. "Sophia," Isabella called, "we need to talk about something." As she shared the news about the Nobel nomination, Isabella watched Sophia process the information with characteristic thoughtfulness. "That's a great honor," Sophia said finally, "but it's also a great responsibility. If we win, people will expect even more from us. Are you ready for that kind of attention and pressure?" Sophia considered the question seriously. "I think my grandmother prepared me for this without realizing it. She taught me that gifts come with obligations, that talent without service is just sophisticated selfishness. If people want to watch what we do, maybe that will inspire them to find their own ways to serve." Isabella felt the familiar surge of pride and amazement that Sophia continued to evoke. At 10 years old, this child possessed wisdom and perspective that many adults never developed. 6 months later, Isabella and Sophia stood together on the stage in Oslo, accepting the Nobel Peace Prize for their work in educational equity and child advocacy. Sophia's acceptance speech, delivered in fluent Norwegian that she had learned specifically for the occasion, moved the international audience to tears. "This prize belongs not just to us, but to every teacher who has nurtured potential they found in unexpected places, to every student who has refused to let circumstances limit their dreams, and to every person who has chosen to build bridges instead of walls," Sophia said, her young voice carrying across the packed auditorium and to television audiences worldwide. "My grandmother taught me that education is the great equalizer, but only if we make it equally available to all children. Isabella taught me that wealth without purpose is poverty of the spirit, but that resources used in service of justice can transform the world." As confetti fell and cameras flashed, Isabella looked at Sophia with infinite love and gratitude. This remarkable child had entered her life asking for leftovers, and had instead given her the greatest feast possible, a life filled with meaning, purpose, and the profound satisfaction that comes from using one's gifts in service of humanity. The little girl who had once been invisible to the world had become a voice for educational justice heard around the globe. The businesswoman who had once measured worth only in dollars had discovered riches beyond calculation in the joy of nurturing human potential. Together, they had proven that transformation is always possible, that one moment of authentic connection between two people can create ripples that change countless lives, and that the greatest success comes not from what we accumulate for ourselves, but from what we help others achieve. As they left the stage in Oslo, hand in hand, Isabella knew that their work was far from finished. There were still millions of children around the world whose potential remained hidden behind barriers of poverty, discrimination, and lack of opportunity. But now they had the resources, the platform, and most importantly, the partnership to continue building a world where every child's gifts would be recognized, nurtured, and celebrated. It had all begun with a simple question: can I eat your leftovers? But it had become something infinitely greater, a legacy of love, learning, and service that would continue long after both of them were gone, touching lives and creating opportunities for generations to come. The small voice that had changed everything had become a chorus, and the leftover food that had sparked their first connection had multiplied into abundance that fed not just bodies, but minds, hearts, and souls around the world.